Salute. Morning.
But the inquiry did not just blame the dead pilot.
The inquiry is now opened.
The full Military Board of Inquiry sat for 3 months. It took evidence from over 140 witnesses. Earlier this month, it released its report. The board found that the accident was inevitable. The end result of a chain of events that included poor judgment by the planners of the mission, but also the way Army had caused the skills of the pilots to degrade. 5 officers now face disciplinary action. The report is blank where their names are listed, but within days of its release, it was public knowledge who they are. The 2 most senior are Colonel Silverstone, the then commanding officer of the SAS, and Lieutenant Colonel Tony Fraser, the commanding officer of 5th Aviation. They face an internal reprimand. The other 3 officers are those in charge of planning and commanding the actual mission. Major Chris Jameson from 5th Aviation, Major Robert Hunter from the SAS, and Captain Sean Bellis from the SAS.
The other 3 will be dealt with by probably court-martial, a Defence Force magistrate, depending upon what the convening authority regards the seriousness of the charge to be.
What would be your prediction?
Oh, I think probably a court-martial if there is a charge.
You know, to me, that's just passing the buck, and I'd hate to see it. I'd hate to see it. As far as I'm concerned, we've probably got some of the best officers in the Australian Defence Force, and they deserve the credit. And if there was errors made on that night, well then, as I said, they're human, the same as that pilot was, and that was an error.
I don't attribute blame to anybody. I don't say that this person caused this to me or this happened to me because of this. I'm not out to blame. I don't hold anybody responsible myself. But that's only my opinion.
How will you feel if there are any disciplinary actions against your friends?
I can't comment on that.
The Board of Inquiry's report lists the mistakes and errors of judgment that it found in the conduct of the mission. The list includes poor and rushed planning, failure to gather accurate data about the target area, changing the mission between the day rehearsal and the night run, choosing a target that was too hard to locate under NVGs, appointing an inexperienced flight lead for such a difficult mission. The list looks damning, but on the day, even highly experienced pilots failed to see the links in the chain that led to the accident, failed to say stop.
No one single thing to me at the time really was so glaringly obvious that it came to my attention that we need to change this, otherwise we've got a problem. But when you look back in hindsight, you talk about the links, small, subtle changes that in the end mount to a problem. Aim is to requalify as a Category D Black Hawk pilot for Vaughan's annual test.
Captain David Burke is one of the regiment's flying instructors. Indeed, one of the few left. In the 18 months before the accident, the Army Aviation Corps lost over 20 flying instructors.
One of the flying safety officers came and we did a little exercise and got us to list about 30 emotional feelings, from glee and pleasure to absolute terror. And he said, draw a line under the feeling that you have where you would stop.
We'll go there.
When you drew that line, he said, go back up 4 or 5 feelings, and that's where you should stop. It gives you a margin. And he said that when you're tired, when you're overworked, when you're stressed, when things are happening, sometimes it'll slip. And what you've got to do is recognise that and bring it back up. And as I said, perhaps at the time I let it slip too far. I didn't say stop when I should have.
On the morning of June the 12th, Captain David Burke jogged to work as usual. He was feeling good. The Army had given him a week off in the lead up to the mission. But for the first time in 12 months, he would not be flying flight lead in the Special Forces operation that was planned for that night. A younger, more junior pilot was taking it on, Captain Kel Hales. How come you weren't flight lead on this occasion?
It was basically just trying to share some of the responsibility within the squadron, as at the time I was flight lead troop commander and flying instructor, and it was just a large workload.
The workload had led the Army psychologist to describe Captain Burke 5 months earlier as chronically fatigued. He'd been consistently working 16-hour days.
Thanks, mate. See ya.
It was demanding. It was very demanding. I was working lots of late nights. It's continuous. And it was just my squadron commander was aware of the fact that I had a large workload, and he was just trying to help me by sharing some of the responsibilities throughout the squadron.
The 5th Aviation Regiment is based in Townsville. The SAS is based in Perth. For just 2 weeks twice a year, they train together for what the Army calls its top priority in peacetime: counter-terrorist work. It's the most dangerous flying that the pilots do.
It's been well documented that we only get the chance to lead up 2 weeks beforehand and exercise twice a year. And it's difficult to maintain our skills. The skills that we need for these exercises deteriorate in between. NVG flying relies as much on recency as it does on qualification. And the fact that we haven't been able to get the training all the time makes it difficult to maintain those skills.
2 exercises a year? No.
Not long enough.
They're not allotted enough flying time for it. We're not saying something that the Army's denying. The senior officers would be behind us now saying, hey, we've been saying this all along. We've been asking for more time, more money to do this job.
It was around midday when Captain Hales conducted the aircrew briefing for the mission that night. It followed the briefing of the SAS, and he used the diagram left on the whiteboard to show the pilots the roping points to which each aircraft was heading. But the whiteboard diagram was wrong. The Board of Inquiry found that this added to the pilots' confusion on the mission that night. The diagram showed a roping point to the left, which just wasn't there. The aviators were unable to spot this because no one from the 5th Aviation Regiment had gone on the recce with the SAS.
There was a video taken of the target area, but it was basically there was something wrong with the video, and we couldn't see. The tape was such poor quality we couldn't see anything on it.
What did people say, or what did people do when they saw that video?
They laughed, basically.
Because you couldn't see a thing?
They were just teasing the guy who did it. Everyone was teasing him, and the guy at the back said, well, it's just wasted a morning of my life, hasn't it?
That afternoon, the aircrew and the SAS flew a full daytime rehearsal with an extra run over the target to make up for the lack of the recce. No one spotted the whiteboard error. The aircraft flew the 3-line abreast formation with no problem. Around 3 p.m, they returned to base. 2 hours later, they were preparing to leave for the nighttime run. But no one outside the actual people involved in the mission itself knew the formation they were planning to fly. Not even the commanding officer of 5th Aviation.
Were you aware that that was the formation that was being flown that night?
I was aware of, in broad detail, as to the conduct of the exercise, but I was not aware of specifics to each particular mission of those.
But you were not aware they were flying 3-line abreast?
I was not aware that they were about to fly the 3-line abreast, that's correct.
Does that concern you, that you weren't aware of that?
The board looked at a number of these issues in detail, and it's not appropriate for me to expand on those.
Lieutenant Colonel Fraser told the board that had he known the formation they were planning to fly at night, he would have insisted on extra safety precautions. It was a formation he disliked.
Flying aircraft in line abreast is extremely difficult. If you imagine driving down a highway beside another car and trying to match it is a particularly demanding task. But flying line abreast is the task that is required for counter-terrorist operations, under some circumstances and under some situations. and it takes a great deal of skill and a great deal of practice, and is of great demands on the pilots and the aircrew that we have.
But as this restricted brief prepared for Major General Ford, one of the highest-ranking officers in the Army, states, the aircrew in 5th Aviation had not been getting a great deal of practice, and their skills had degraded. It's dated just 10 weeks before the accident. The decrease in capability can be categorised in 3 areas: currency, proficiency and safety. The most senior officers in the Army were specifically warned of degraded skills in formation flying and support to Special Force operations. Exactly the kind of mission flown on June the 12th. Crews will not be fully proficient, they were told, to undertake demanding tasks. So how come they were doing it?
I wasn't aware about General Ford saying that. I was aware about General Keating, his predecessor, saying that. In fact, he gave evidence before the board to that effect.
You see, what people are going to be asking is, if in the months preceding the accident there's been a concern at the level of General Ford about formation flying in special recovery operations, how come 2 months later people are flying what everyone concedes is a very dangerous, highly complex mission?
Look, we're always dependent upon the people that we've trained for these command positions to make the appropriate decisions at the time. Now, I would suggest to you that the individuals who were doing this particular activity weren't doing it for the first time. They'd been training for periods leading up to this. It's up to them to make a decision about whether they are ready to do this sort of thing.
So responsibility vests right down at that level, and no one above that level is responsible for how dangerous those missions are?
You know in aviation that the captain of the aircraft is always the person who's responsible for the aircraft.
But General Sanderson has now taken over that responsibility. 5th Aviation is no longer flying line abreast formations at night.
So who's
but I
right?
stopped that. I stopped that until we got the board's findings. And once we've got the board's findings, we're putting a process in place to raise the proficiency in these areas.
And that's because we accept now that it is too dangerous for 5th Aviation to do it?
Until they're trained to the levels where they can do it.
So you accept that they weren't trained to the levels that they can do it?
I accept that there's things that have got to be changed to make sure that they're absolutely proficient in those things before we attempt that particular type of manoeuvre again.
Should 5th Aviation Regiment have undertaken this mission?
The regiment is prepared to support any tasks that are asked of us, and we will continue to do so. And the counter-terrorist tasks we were prepared to support, and we will continue to do so. Thank you. Sit easy. Thank you.
Lieutenant Colonel Fraser only came to the 5th Aviation Regiment as its commanding officer 6 months before the accident. It wasn't a job many people were prepared to take on. The unit was in crisis.
That's through chain of command, but it really is important. They look forward to flying. Any aircrew, any unit that's a flying unit, if the aircraft aren't flying, clearly the morale is not going to be as it should be and as it would be and as it is when we've got the aircraft flying.
You said it was a unit in crisis.
Obviously that's taken from my evidence to the Board of Inquiry. They were extremely challenging times.
The Army had acquired the Black Hawks in 1989, and 5 years later the public scandal broke. Between the Army and the Air Force combined, they'd botched the ordering of spare parts and maintenance. At one point in February 1995, only 3 of the 27 Black Hawks based in Townsville were serviceable to fly. Over $400 million worth of aircraft sat on the tarmac or in the hangars, waiting for parts and repairs.
It has been a difficult few years because everyone just wants to do their job. And we haven't been able to do it because we just haven't had the aircraft available. A lot of our senior people have resigned, a lot of flying instructors have resigned. We've lost a lot of pilots. So we lost valuable experience there. And also the maintenance problems that we had for 94, 95, when junior pilots should have been getting flying to allow them to build up an experience base. It just hasn't been able to occur because we haven't had the serviceable aircraft to do so.
The Board of Inquiry report states explicitly that these systemic problems contributed to the tragic outcome, that the shortage of serviceable aircraft, the reduction in aircrew proficiency and the high pilot separation rates were part of the conditions and environment in which the accident became inevitable.
So would you accept that Army is responsible for a black hole of experience which, when filtered through, led to this accident?
Well, I'm not. I'm saying that this should have been corrected earlier. That's true. And indeed, it's an ADF problem because, you know, Air Force are the maintainers of these helicopters for us. They're the ones that control the provision of spare parts and the deep maintenance of these helicopters.
So Air Force is responsible as well?
It's a defence responsibility, and it was addressed as a defence responsibility.
So are you blaming Air Force?
Not at all.
The Board of Inquiry basically identifies two sets of causes for why the accident occurred, and the first set of causes are bad errors of judgment made by individuals concerned with the particular mission, and the second set of problems are systemic problems. Now, the people responsible for the first potentially face administrative and disciplinary charges, but the people responsible for the second haven't even been named, let alone censured.
I've
Is that
been
fair?
at great pains to avoid talking about who's being disciplined and who's being investigated and so on.
But the question is, the board also said that there are a whole set of contributory factors, the systemic problems. No one is being held responsible or accountable for those.
But the systemic problems are associated with things like the overlap between flying instructions and flying orders and all of those sorts of things.
And lack of resources and lack of flying hours and spare parts problems, they're all identified by the board.
Yes, but you see, a lack of resources has never been an excuse for unsafe practices. Never. A lack of resources has never been an excuse for unsafe practices. The buck always stops with the commander. If he says, I can't do this because I haven't got the resources to do it, then that's accepted.
The buck doesn't really stop with the junior commanders, in my view.
Where does it stop?
Oh, ultimately with those who decided not to properly fund Army aviation.
And is that the Army itself in terms of the priority given, or is that the politicians?
I don't know. It's a combination of both, and this board wasn't asked to find that. But somebody should, because at the end of the day, there's a rank failure somewhere to properly support Army aviation.
Normally, you'd be disappointed. You'd say, "Oh, right, you know, that's not getting that particular aspect's not getting the sort of funding that it requires." When you lose someone to it, yeah, it makes you feel pretty angry then. But normally, it's more of a disappointment than anger.
It's like a stop sign at a traffic intersection. How many people have to die before they put up lights? They will tell you they have to find out, you know, so many accidents and that has to happen before they want to spend the money on that particular intersection. And so this accident, because of the magnitude of the loss, 18 people, 18 fit young men that it had taken a lot of money to train, their lives are gone, and they haven't got them. They've got to replace those people, and they're understaffed in the first place.
Well, I accept that there were significant deficiencies in the way this thing was being resourced and overseen. And I suggest to you that we had put in place a new resourcing regime and a new command regime to correct that.
People might feel now that that was a bit too late.
Well, it may have been a bit late in the light of these circumstances, but all I can say is that it's improved quite dramatically the availability of aircraft and indeed the availability of training time for people who are flying these sorts of things.
Do you think there's a question that should be asked of the upper Army brass, where does the buck stop?
I'm not allowed to comment any further on any of the board's findings.
The overall picture that emerges from the Board of Inquiry's report is of a growing gap between the expectations placed on the aviators and their proficiency, a gap that was addressed too late. The aviators were in a lose-lose situation, fail to meet the expectations or push themselves too far. In this case, they pushed themselves too far. Those who expected too much of them on the night of June the 12th may well be court-martialled. But those who fail to give them the time, the money, the training, the spare parts and the manpower that led to the degradation of their skills will walk away. The survivors live with the memory.
I still love flying, but it's lost something. It's lost the romance or the innocence, I think, because when I'm out instructing at night on goggles and we're flying and if something goes wrong, I know what's waiting at the end. And it's a very sobering experience, and it's something there that's always in the back of your mind.
Don't suppose there's too many days go by where you don't think about it, and, you know, sometimes you might have a bit of trouble sleeping, but...
And other survivors are affected differently from the way I am. You know, you've got children to try and maintain a posture in front of you, you've got a wife you've got to try and maintain a posture, and, you know, and things happen to you that you have no control of. You know, like it took me 6 or 7 months to get out and work in the garden again, you know, and for no reason. You know, I wanted to go out, but I didn't want to. You know, I'd rather just sit inside and have a beer and just hug the kids and kiss the kids. There was no reason for it, but that's what happened. I can't explain it.
You know, like I said, we consider ourselves to be fortunate. And I got my hanky this time. And we are very much aware of the 18 blokes that we lost, and the effect that that's had on, you know, how many people. You can't even count the amount of people that it's had the effect on. Wives, children, parents, brothers, sisters. And to me, that's worse than the position that I was in by any means. So, like I said, we're pretty happy.
The unit, the Defence Force, everybody has to move on, and that doesn't mean you forget. You can't forget. You'll never forget. That's why I remember, you know, you remember the Anzacs. You can't forget what these people have, well, they've given up. So you move on, but you don't forget.